Welcome back to a Super Mario Odyssey series, where we'll take a look at each and every kingdom, examining the captures, the moons, the mechanics, the level design, the bosses, you name it. If you missed the series kickoff, please start with the precursor analysis explaining moons as a reward system. So let's begin from the top of Bowser's wedding ship. Whoa, watch out Mario, Bowser's gonna take the wedding scene from Super Paper Mario and make it the entire plot. Now, I know Odyssey ain't no Mario RPG, but the story might as well be non-existent. In fact, removing the conflict would have left the moons in an almost equivalent state, since they only serve as a low requirement gate that quickly becomes irrelevant, and the precious items being stolen never show up as rewards. Imagine, right? Presenting these items as the final reward of a kingdom, and thus restoring said kingdom into a peaceful state. It could most definitely improve Odyssey's reward system, and as a bonus, the story, opening up more opportunities for character interactions, actual objectives, any plot device that isn't whatever this is. At the very least, there's great potential for these wedding artifacts to act as an additional reward type other than the pig known as Moon. Currently, these stolen assets only show up as glorified moons at the very end of the game, which isn't a bad bonus for objects solely used to justify Bowser's journey around the world, but their purpose only further proves Odyssey's intention of driving a shallow story. Oh, right. Speaking of shallow, Peach and technically Tiara are the plot points of this game, but due to the lack of development, there's no expectation that we should care. We can compare this to previous 3D Mario titles in the lineup that Nintendo has officially stated. The introduction to Sunshine, for instance, sets us up on a vacation, but we quickly become trapped due to being framed into community service. Yes, Peach is missing almost all of her chromosomes, but the focus is on cleaning up Delfino with a Mario clone mystery looming over us.
Marijuana affects each person's mind and body differently. There's no way to predict what it might do to you.
Mario 64 is similar to Odyssey in the story department. However, 64 at the very least had its castle hub that provided the mystery and intrigue that supplied the world building, motive to explore, and sense of progression outside of the stars in the gameplay.
Died the way he lived.
In the same way, Sunshine's setting of Delfino felt like a very real place with a mystery and an overall consistently strong presentation that's varied yet coherent. Both Peach's castle and Delfino were our homes for the entire journey, so caring about the setting and its inhabitants was more of a focus. Odyssey doesn't have that luxury, and its capture system was implemented to introduce new thematic captures in distinct locales. So what this means is that Odyssey's hub is a level select screen. We're already without the benefit that 64 and Sunshine had, and it's down to how well the kingdoms themselves and the captures within hold up. Ironically enough, for a game intended to be focused heavily on exploration, kingdoms are rather jarring in how they're isolated. They just kinda stop existing. We can see this from the very beginning. Bowser's ship is situated above the Mushroom Kingdom, a tiny floating island above a green landscape. Mario is tossed into the sky to typical comedic effect. He not only doesn't land back in his home, but nowhere near it, not even on the plains below, and he clearly wasn't sent that far. Not to mention, Cap Kingdom comprises several pretty expansive cities. Cap Kingdom cannot be situated next to the Mushroom Kingdom in any reasonable capacity. The only layout that makes sense would be if the Mushroom Kingdom is floating above the Cap Kingdom, cause nothing else can explain this. If this mushroom above Cap layout was implemented as a novelty, and let's be honest, a layered world like that sounds like a pretty neat concept, nothing is ever done with it. So this game has me thinking it's stacked vertically when it takes place across the entire globe. Maybe the world is our oyster and we were swallowed up. Ironically enough, this scene could have been fixed by adding the typical twinkle of light, because the fact that we went from daytime in Mushroom to nighttime in Cap should suggest that we were sent across the entire planet, and that's simply not the case here. After the unfortunate incident, we end up in Bonneton, a small shipping center in the Cap Kingdom, flat against the ground, where we learn the camera controls before the game allows us to wake up. Useless fact, if we wait for 3.5 seconds, the camera controls show up. Once we're allowed, we can pop up for both Cappy characterization and introducing the jumping controls in a safe and mandatory event. The small hill we landed on was flattened by our impact, which is comedic and, well, great for lying a flat body against. We're forced to move up the biggest hill, I'm guessing to teach the idea of increased downhill movement speed. However, Mario's movement doesn't allow for increased speed or momentum to be that noticeable, and the bridge also serves that purpose to a slightly lesser extent. It's also quite strange that Cappy just waits for us on the hill and doesn't hide somewhere right away. We move across the bridge for Cappy's intro to have it suddenly cut from him chilling on one side to already being on the other. Cappy moves back and forth between both sides, so this comes across as an oversight. While Mario's recruiting a new hat, let's discuss the Cap Kingdom aesthetic, because wow, what a strange aesthetic we have going on here. This gloomy and gray place is quite a jarring change from previous titles, especially as a first level, not to mention the residents are hat ghost creatures. I'm excited to see what is done with it. We're left to run around a small area with the most basic of interactable objects, no enemies, and on-screen controls. This is a very effective way to start off, given plenty of room and time for the player to adjust to jumping and hat throwing that leads to using the hat throw on both the bridge lever and frog capture, while clearly sectioning off progress via tower, door, and bridge. The controls, the single button remains on the screen well past our initial interactions with the environment, but that's more time consuming to compensate for, rather than just setting the prompt to the entire area. We can see how they just slapped the control in and left it there until it finally buggers off at the bridge instead of at the lever that requires the hat throw, or any other interactable object, or just the fact that Cappy was thrown X number of times. This isn't lazy if they don't have the time for it, and I'm inclined to believe they didn't have much time to spend on this game.
It's time to stop!
Let's move to the Hat Tower. There's a block introduction for some hat throwing practice and a water and swimming introduction, but more importantly, this water shows one of the two strengths that frogs have, which is swimming. Indeed, the capture mechanic is first introduced here. The frog can perform a single action, and that is the second of the frog's strengths, high jumping. The frog is initially taught very well, considering we must use it to advance. We make it to the top to find Scared Hat Ghost, and rightfully so. Bowser just kidnapped his first wedding item and left the town in shambles, and then just so happened to teleport Mario to the exact location where this atrocity happened. At the tippy top, we're already introduced to a boss, the first of the Brutals. Topper jumps down and tries to hit us by pathetically falling onto his face.
No!
Topper is not meant to test jumping, as most of our platforming thus far was as the frog capture. So right away, Odyssey is testing Cappy as a tool that we've been playing around with. It's also an excuse to introduce the Brutals, since we'll be seeing them around fairly often. Topper topples and dies, yet he appears back later on, which is confusing. Our reward for finishing this introduction is a power line that leads over the fog to a far off land where the Odyssey just so happens to be chillin'. Wonderful. It's strange that the power line is run into a far off land from this tiny island rather than from the Cap Kingdom itself. You know, the entire cities that are clearly part of the Cap Kingdom. Do they not have a power grid set up? Is Bonneton independently powered? Is the Hat Tower a giant generator for the entire kingdom? Are the cities not powered at all? Do they have a different power source? Are these Cappians using whale oil from fog whales to power everything? The only possible explanation for this power line would be that they use moon juice to power their airships, and the spark pylon capture is a hallucination. At least I hope nobody was dependent on this single power line, cause Mario just broke it off. There's also no explanation as to why Fossil Falls needed power to begin with, let alone stretched across the entire ocean. Of course, who cares about the power line situation, but when an element is just thrown in, it can start stirring the pot and the world-building stew can begin to boil. This kingdom is so close to acting as a believable fantasy setting in its own right, but the lack of creativity shown in haphazardly placing a spark pylon as a capture reused throughout the entire game is quite concerning, especially when we're in a shipping center, a place meant for shipping.
But Corvus, there are no ships left. How would shipping be possible?
Yes, young child, that's rather convenient, isn't it? Indeed, Bonneton's hat airships is one way to fix this spark pylon mess. Imagine if Cappy had a son or younger sibling who somehow still had his tiny hat airship that we could utilize as a capture, but it cannot hold the moon juice we need for the longer travel distances, which fits perfectly considering that's the entire point of the game. That is not only thematically appropriate and removes the power line contrivancy, but it could also introduce some character development. Imagine if the sibling gives up his or her favorite possession for the sake of Tiara. Maybe it's something that Cappy pulls out and there's a bit of backstory to it. Perhaps it's Bonneton's emergency vehicle in case of a disaster. Since Bonneton is a shipping center, I would imagine the Hat Tower is the warehouse. There's an astronomical amount of potential here that's just thrown away. Everything, the captures, the characterization, the world building would have been improved. I know personally this game really needs it too, especially since I'm not given a reason to care about Cappy. What we need is a Mario version of Midna. Oh, we'll discuss another possible avenue for replacing the spark pylon next episode. Alright, we're already finished with Bonneton's objectives, so let's dive into its sub-areas. Except let's not dive, because we die. Moon 6 is a moon shard moon. Collect the 5 moon shards, dipping closer and closer to the poisonous waves, as we flap our way to the other side. This is an effective use of the Paragoomba capture because it tests our verticality control. The 5th moon shard is used solely for direction, however, and so the challenge ends on moon shard 4. These moon shards are all located one after the other in a straight path, so this sub-area isn't as effective as it could have been. Exploration could have been involved, additional hazards, different angles, maybe even frogs. Regardless, the intention is clearly to test us on verticality control, and they did accomplish this. Just as the name suggests, the bonus Moon 7, Slippin' Through the Poison Tide, has a slippin' instead of skimmin'. We find a secret opening and time our flight through to avoid the poison waves. The idea itself is a well-executed bonus twist on the capture. However, we know or will know that every sub-area has a bonus moon, so the fact that it's a hidden secret is diminished by the other fact that we'll fly around the sub-area until we find said bonus moon. This secret area rewards us with purple coins as well. Why purple coins? These and the moon are a hefty reward for only a single hidden entrance. The purpose of these coins is to encourage exploration, but we didn't do anything differently compared to just heading straight to the bonus moon. They're right in front of us, and so these should have been removed. The slip-in bonus twist isn't expanded upon and is instead immediately followed by a slow ascent, where we're incentivized to use the capture due to the gap in between some of these platforms. We could consider this as another Paragoomba twist, but there's no challenge or skill involved. It's a slow climb because we're forced to land after each jump due to the Paragoomba's max height needing to reset. Moon 8 is a rare gem because it actually focuses on platforming while also utilizing a capture. We power line our way on over, which can be considered as introducing the power line to this area before the mix-up. A push block is introduced here safely, then we jump a gap while paying mind to the blocks that may just push us off to our deaths. Now remove the safety net, jump up across power line mix-up, time the power line, and jump to the end before the blocks retract. There's a power line break with some purple coins. These don't award exploration per se, but they at least incentivize a capture interaction. Now some blocks are in, some are out, and finally stacked blocks. This is exactly how to ramp up a challenge. Not only that, but the spark pylon capture was directly involved with some of these push blocks. Even though this capture could have been further explored if we kept going, just the fact that the capture was mixed in with the platforming at all is quite the accomplishment. This sub-area's bonus Moon 9, on the other hand, is heavily hinted at via this block. For one, it's the only push block shaped like this. For 2, the L shape is side by side with the platform on the same elevation. They're essentially taking the static platform and extending it to half a dynamic one that just so happens to contain a moon. For 3, this sub-area is already short and breaks up platforming with the purple coins, so there's no need to break up the area further with the moon that screams our names and requires walking a few steps. At the very least, if we wanted to keep this bonus moon, extend this challenge out significantly further. Implement these bonus moons as actual challenging moons, but slap in a pipe at the first moon like we have here to give people a way out who don't want the extra challenge. I would still argue 2 moons is excessive, but it's an idea that may be worth exploring. Oh baby, we have another Moonshard extravaganza for Moon 10. We actually utilize the frogs for these Moonshards as well, so this is a great addition to the frog capture. However, despite some of the platforming involved that I want to give credit where credit's due, the Moonshards aren't fully taken advantage of here. For example, this bonus Moon 11 is relatively hidden and requires jumping on a teeny ledge. This could have been a very well-placed moon shard that required additional exploration rather than an entire moon. Not to mention just the fact that a bonus moon exists in a moon shard room really just devalues and limits or confines the moon shards as an object and concept that won't ever be expanded upon or cleverly hidden. Another example that really perplexes me are the purple coins. Why are these coins not just a moon shard? Two of the moon shards were placed right next to each other in front of the entrance. Those could have been moved to replace the bonus moon and purple coins.
But Corvus, this first shard is meant to inform the player that this is a moon shard Siberia.
If you can't be bothered to do the exact thing this game wants you to do, explore, in an extremely small boxed-in room, then why are you playing this game?
The game is fun.
Alright, now to Bonneton's worldly moons. The very first moon makes me hop with glee as we utilize the frog capture in the world itself. We see a moon up high and must hop horizontally, then vertically on relatively small blocks, moving from 3 to 1. This is an excellent start, progressing from the Hat Tower frog introduction to much tighter platforming. Moon 2, on the other hand, strips Moon 1 down and removes any challenge from both the horizontal movement and the vertical platforming. The Hat Tower served the purpose of introducing both the frog capture and the new capture idea in general, so this moon is needless and should have been removed. This isn't the only issue, however. A normal jump won't quite reach the moon. Not even a normal jump plus release will quite reach the moon. This moon requires motion. It actually requires us to shake the controller for that tad bit of extra height on a console that advertises its portability. There's no reason to force players to shake their switches around unless you want them to jiggle a few screws loose. It makes it difficult to see what's going on as well, especially since Odyssey requires jerky motions for some of its moves locked behind motion controls. Oh, and yes, some moves are only available via motion, so if you don't want to utilize this hardware feature, too bad. For example, the home and hat throw is impossible to execute without motion. This comes across as complete laziness when the intuitive implementation could have been to press the hat button a second time. Throwing your hat up into the air and onto the ground is impossible without motion as well. This is problematic when there are certain purple coins that require a motion-related hat throw. Yes, you can ground pound then throw, but I'm not seeing that in the championed action guide that the game really wants you to look at. As a bonus, a very similar input results in speedballs, so that's a distinction to trial and error since it's also not in the action guide. The motion controls in general are a great option for players, but they should always remain as an option. The motion can be a joy for some people to mess around with at home with detached Joy-Cons, not in a subway on your way to work or while laying in bed. There's no reason to exclude choice here and punish players who use the portability function. In fact, docked versus undocked play is split pretty evenly, and this excludes offline devices. This makes Nintendo appear lazy and unaccommodating of their own system. And to confirm this complete lack of a sensical control scheme, several buttons, Y, A, R, and Z are not used for anything but duplicate actions. These could have been mapped to some of the multi-button moves at the very least, such as the quick swim and dive. The quick swim controls have gameplay issues that we'll discuss in a future episode. Diving was tied to a single button in A Hat in Time and worked wonderfully. A Hat in Time's dive also felt overall much better, with more control and potential distance, more unique travel and platforming opportunities, and it's more intuitive and easier to execute on a whim. Odyssey could have benefited, albeit Odyssey's platforming is sparse. For example, the world-renowned Cappy throw into dive sequence could have been easier and more intuitive, especially since one would expect Cappy to retract when you let go of the throw button to transition into a dive, like how Cappy reacts normally. Oh, and of course, this is ignoring the obvious accessibility issues. For example, people whose hands shake uncontrollably cannot play Odyssey because the motion controls cannot be turned off. Sure, the option is in the settings, but that actually only turns off the camera motion for certain captures, so it's completely misleading and prevents people with certain disabilities from playing. And even if the option did work, you're still locked out from executing certain moves regardless, from both Mario and almost every capture in the game. This is simply inexcusable.
Okay, bye-bye.
Not only locking content behind motion controls on a portable console, but locking the entire game behind motion controls for some players. Back to Moons 1 and 2, these two moons are all we get in terms of worldly frog moons in the entire kingdom. How about actually incorporating the hat airships? Maybe a mix of small and normal hat airships that act as platforms beyond the tiny sample from Moon 1. That could allow us to scale to incredible heights as a frog, or allow us to platform throughout the fog areas while still leaving the Paragoombas for exploring the nooks and crannies. Granted, the hat airships aren't fixed until post-game, but then truly expand the potential here in post-game, or implement quests involving fixing these airships. This timer challenge Moon 3 doesn't really test anything. I found that walking and nothing else will barely miss you the moon, and walking in a single long jump, or anything that gives that slight speed boost, will net you the moon. I'm inclined to believe that this timer challenge might have intended for us to utilize rolling, but barely anything is necessary here, let alone rolling. The only effective part about this timer challenge is that it's integrated within the world itself. It could have been changed to require rolling as a focused way to introduce the action guide concept without needing the action guide. Even then, it wouldn't work if these changes were made, since this is optional and is part of a kingdom that players won't return to for potentially quite a while. I imagine this specific scenario here would only really work as a rolling introduction. It doesn't stand on its own outside of that. Moon 4 is granted to us by dear old Captain Toad. No, that's it. He's not hidden, nor does he offer any Captain Toad stages or any unique collectible, for instance. 3D World offered Captain Toad stages as an optional mix-up, so I'm surprised Odyssey didn't do this as well, considering the existence of 2D segments, so we know this game likes to walk that genre-breaking line. There are 3 NPCs that tell us that someone is up there. One of them straight out yanks the camera and control out of our hands and yells at us to go check it out. How is this supposed to be rewarding in any way? It can't be much of a surprise since we already know someone is up there. It can't be to introduce Captain Toad in any meaningful way since there's nothing to gain from this besides knowing that Captain Toad exists. He's not hidden in some kind of puzzly or adventurous way like one would expect. At the very least, why isn't he just an NPC here rather than a moon? He mentions the moon, no, not that moon, I mean the actual moon in the sky, which establishes Captain Toad as an adventurous sightseer who could have been used to point out missable attractions or some kind of hint for a puzzle. The latter is actually used, as we'll discuss soon enough, but regardless, it's diminished by the moon given to us. Let's leave Captain Toad behind for now. We can buy Moon 5 at a vendor. The only effort required here is having the 100 coins necessary to purchase it. No, not purple coins, I mean yellow coins. When would we ever not have the coins for these shop moons? I'm convinced that it takes more effort to not end up with enough coins to purchase these. And there's never a reason to not purchase them. They just shouldn't exist. Now, the rest of the moons are post-game, and for some reason the game doesn't tell us this. Some people who like to find and collect every moon in a kingdom before proceeding may continue searching but to no avail, and this is frustrating. Some post-game moons are locked inside moon rocks, and these are not initially included in the moon count, which fixes this issue. Why Odyssey decided to separate post-game moons from post-game moons? I don't know. So in Bonneton's post-game, the hat airships are repaired, are flying in front of the moon, and are still never utilized in the world itself. There's a very clear avenue they could have taken with these post-game moons that would have made sense, but instead, they arbitrarily added a hole in a ship, installed binoculars, tossed in Koopa racing, and hung up some art. Let's start with Moon 12, a quest that we obtained from an NPC, much to my surprise. Instead of marking a location on the screen, we have to find the places that he's describing. The highlight is the narrow pathway that dips into the fog, since we may think about the bridges before the actual location. This hint is crucial since this kind of quest could quickly become tedious otherwise. This quest could also effectively use hints and detective work of some sort, especially since Bonneton has many landmarks. But the aforementioned hint is the only example of such design, so the moon's potential isn't taken advantage of or fully explored. For Moon 13, I want to say Captain Toad was hinting at, but only if you talk to him during the post-game or are otherwise swayed by his perpetual dialogue and gaze. If we stare at the moon from the top of this tower with him, it's not too difficult to notice the strange floating taxi, so that may begin churning our brain cells and will eventually lead ourselves to the binoculars. Well, if we are led to believe that taxi holds a moon in the first place, it's a complete guess. In either case, this is hint dialogue with a little bit of a puzzle element. Not too shabby, definitely better than if they just look at the taxi! That's the good side of the equation. The bad side is if you talk to Captain Toad before post-game and don't walk up to him again since you already took his moon and you assume that he's just really into that humongous moon. And who can blame him? It's pretty gosh darn big. So this moon can either be a hint dialogue moon, or essentially a game of Where's Waldo, except you don't even realize you're playing it until it's over. Don't get me wrong here, Captain Toad's subtle hint to stare at the moon so you might see the weird floating taxi is great and is much better than dialogue that spells everything out. But it would have worked better if Captain Toad wasn't here pre-post game. That's it. that's the only change, and this moon would be fine. Okay, so I don't understand Moon 14. This is before the post-game. Now, boom! Oh, why, when he repaired his hat airship, did he carve this cave into it? Are these airships powered by moons as well? In either case, someone should tell him this is the wrong way to store a moon. It would have been safer inside his home instead of sabotaging both his home and the moon. As far as the moon itself, I applaud them for utilizing a capture to interact with an NPC in some fashion, but this is very handholdy. We can discover on our own that these Cappians are afraid of Paragoombas, also considering that virtually every NPC in the entire game is scared of every capture in the game. This is a moon we could have figured out on our own. How can we get this Cappian to move? And once we figure it out, we can feel that satisfaction of accomplishment, of solving a predicament. There's no satisfaction in being told to fetch the Paragoomba right next to us for a moon. It's just turning a potential predicament into a tedious chore. Moon 15 is racing Koopas from the top of the Hat Tower to the tallest hill. It would have been more engaging if captures were viable, or if there were shortcuts we could utilize, or flags we had to hit as a few examples, since these races really emphasize the lack of momentum that previous 3D Mario titles had. Long jumping and rolling feel relatively heavy, especially given such a simple race course. Imagine if, for these races, we were a fast and nimble Koopa, and we could curl up in our shell and race around quickly. I mean, Koopas are just non-existent in this game, and this Koopa capture idea is obvious. The contestants themselves actually pull a trick or two, like long jumping on raised platforms. However, when they're walking normally, it's at the same pace as Mario, so once we gain the lead, victory is guaranteed, and gaining the lead just requires long jumps and rolling as if you're traversing the environment normally. There are no tricks to pull. There are a couple good spots for rolling that we can take advantage of, but it's a very one-track mind kind of race. For Moon 16, it's pretty neat seeing Peach actually traveling, although it's kinda too late for me to start caring about her character in any way after the whole situation the game reined her through. There's also no effort involved here, she's just something to notice. If she was a character I cared about, and if she didn't hand out a moon, I'd be curious and interested about her perspective on these kingdoms, but unfortunately, the lack of a story or any character development whatsoever squanders any potential for this. And finally, we encounter Moon 17's hint art. Hint art requires you to take a screenshot and store it in your system, which is just dumb. Why would you ever implement a system that takes a player outside of the game? The preferred storage method would be to have its own menu, or if they want to get creative, add the hint art to the map sides where kingdom information currently resides. Both of these options, while one more immersive than the other, are both more immersive, not to mention organized, than just saying, hey, screenshot this and go to your system photos to check it out. This is so blatantly lazy, it's shocking. As far as hint art itself, it's this game's closest system to a difficult puzzle, so I'll give it credit where credit's due. This one specifically is reasonable since we can tell which kingdom it's in, and then we just have to figure out these weird colored blocks. It's a puzzle that isn't too vague and isn't a complete gimme. To conclude Bonneton, this town and world design is surprisingly static and straightforward despite the airship potential. There also could have been some kind of ghost twist or capture, maybe a haunted mansion. Perhaps we could platform on or capture airships that we could then use to discover more of the Cap Kingdom outside of Bonneton. Maybe involve the fog in some way. Of course, these would require substantially more effort, but again, just the fact that these mobile homes are never used in any way is sorely disappointing and significant lost potential. Speaking of lost potential, we quite literally turn that into kinetic energy to take the easy way out, which is not quite what I had in mind. Capturing a weak hat airship that we have to ditch in Fossil Falls is better in every aspect. The frog capture was used for one good worldly platforming moon and used for a moon shard sub area that was a great addition, but wasn't quite enough to do the frogs justice. The motion controls locks out content and can lock out the entire game. The control scheme was haphazardly thrown together, especially when there are so many unused buttons. Goodness, even the option to turn off motion controls doesn't work as it should. They didn't even try. The Paragoomba capture was used to explore Bonneton for a single set of purple coins and for a hand-holding NPC interaction. This capture was also used for a single sub-area that very briefly expanded upon the capture. Captain Toad should not have given out a moon, considering he's used for his post-game hint dialogue, whether intentional or not, and every NPC shouts to the moon and back about his existence. The timer challenge doesn't test anything, the side quest is unique and isn't straight tediousness, Waldo makes his appearance, and we're given the pleasure of an actual platforming capture sub-area with proper escalation that results in the most satisfaction out of any moon in Bonneton. What is this? A post-game moon rock that adds more moons to this place? Oh man, there's a chance of providing challenging post-game content that will satisfy everyone who is still playing past the ending? Oh, well, first off, they add to the max moon count, so the moon rocks are at least good at something that the other post-game moons fail at. These new moons are marked on our map, so there's nothing for us to do here except to follow the map. There's nothing to discover, and we've most likely already combed over this kingdom, collecting every moon up until this point, so that's just a recipe for disaster. And it is, because every Moonrock moon is excessively simple. Virtually nothing here is new, unique, or tougher to appease to any crowd this game may be targeting. Want something more challenging after the Mindless Gathering? Too bad. Here's more Mindless Gathering, but in an area you've already explored, and many of these moons are easier than the base moons. So even if you don't want any challenging post-game content, these moons will wear you down pretty quickly if the game hasn't already. So let us begin this padding by following our newly acquired treasure map. Moon 18 requires a single jump to a lower platform. That's it. Moon 19 should have been purple coins at the very most, as there are only 3 sets of them that reward exploration via Paragoombas. And these 3 sets are right next to each other, meaning the rest of the Paragoomba exploration is meaningless. And 2 of the sets don't need the Paragoomba anyway. Yeah, there's not really any reason to explore or use the Paragoomba. Purple coins could have been spread around the kingdom in a way that rewards exploring the nooks and crannies of Bonneton via Paragoomba prior to post-game. But instead, we have post-game moons like this one. There's nothing clever about where this moon is placed and is part of the post-game tediousness. In all honesty, purple coins wouldn't even be a great fit here. They should be part of the environment like these, not stranded out in the middle of nowhere. Moon 20 is, again, part of the blatant padding, made worse by the fact that it takes longer for the game to load the flag warping than it does to actually grab the moon. Oof. Moon 21 lies in the fog itself, partially obfuscated from view by the Hat Tower. This is essentially the bare minimum interaction regarding the kingdom's unique fog attribute, so it's a bummer that this is not expanded upon. Ironically enough, we'll actually encounter a fog sub-area that does just that in a future kingdom for some reason. Regardless, this is actually a fairly decent moon, given the capture exploration, and it involves the kingdom's fog in some manner outside of aesthetics. Oh, except this is a moonrock moon, so this is not about exploration, and is instead marked on the map for you.
But, Corvus, what if I don't look at the map, so I can retain my sense of exploration in some capacity?
That's good for you, but that doesn't make the treasure map design choice any less flawed, at least the way Odyssey implemented it. If you want to make your own fun, then go ahead. Pretend to be a pirate crossing the Delaware fog to find the hidden Atlantean moon. Who knows, maybe Aquaman will swoop up and kiss ya before dragging you into his underwater dungeon. Ooh. Hey, remember the purple coins up by the bridge entrance? Yeah, let's place Moon 22 there because we've run out of ideas at this point. Oh, and we don't want you to miss out on it in case you've already collected the coins, so we'll mark it on the map for you. Love you too, sweetie. Moon 23 is similar to the previous moons left out in the open fog. We can go ahead and just grab it on our way back to land from activating the moon rock, cause why not? We're already here. The act of finding Moon 24 is no different than the sets of purple coins we discussed earlier that are right next to it. The coins at least require or incentivize the Paragoomba capture. This moon doesn't, and what is it? What is this moon even? Moons 25 and 26 are the least affected by the map. 25 is a chase, a railroaded chase where you can practically see the rails grinding underneath the bird. With that said, this is one of the best Paragoomba moons hands down because we can scout out our prey and plan our attack, at least theoretically. This could be a start for some kind of Paragoomba mastery test. 26 is another chase, but grounded. These rabbits could be effective for encouraging the player to discover new routes, paths, or approaches. In this case, we can figure out that rolling is a great way to capture the rabbit, or we can cut it off, but in either case, encouraging a base mechanic such as rolling actually involves the player, rather than mindlessly chasing until it slows down and stops. Oh. Wait, it actually does slow down and stop, so whatever possible solution the player could devise is diminished by its exhaustion. But why stop there? How about a rabbit that is impossible to catch unless we sneak up on it from above using a Paragoomba capture? This allows players to think outside the box, similar to the Moon 14 changes I suggested. In either case, remove the exhaustion and this moon would be fine. Moon 27 is a musical note timed challenge. This requires the Paragoomba capture and, as a variant of the Moon 6 sub-area, tests our verticality control, but it's more focused on maintaining the same altitude. Unfortunately, it's extraordinarily brief. It doesn't take advantage of the fog, there's no obstacles, and no variation or different trials or segments to this badminton racket of a course. Musical notes in Odyssey are essentially a lesser version of red coins from previous titles. We should be planning out the best course of action to collect these musical notes given our understanding of the area that we've been exploring. I will say that the camera works very well as a Paragoomba. When flying at the highest altitude, the camera is angled forward. When descending, the camera is angled down to help with landing, and most importantly, if we move the camera vertically to help with collecting the musical notes, for instance, then the camera will remain and won't budge. This is excellent since the camera is not actively fighting against us. Moon 28 is a timer challenge and requires 4 jumps on top of huge and slow platforms. First of all, aesthetically, they could have incorporated airships as platforms. I'm sorry, but that's kind of obvious. Why would you not want to incorporate a kingdom's unique traits and attributes where you can, for the sake of consistency, immersion, and world building? This timer challenge is just silly. Speaking of silly, these platforms are, as I've said, huge and slow, meaning there's no challenge in timing our jumps correctly despite the timer not allowing for any mistakes. Moon 29, the repeated Koopa Race moon. First of all, only one aspect changes for this Koopa race, a golden Koopa. Nothing else changes. Same exact goal, no additional platforms, no midway markers to force a less straightforward path, nothing. Second of all, the golden Koopa starts off fast to give the impression that it's quick, but then it takes an unbelievably slow alternative route by committing suicide, and then it captures nothing. It captures nothing and then flies away. The slowness itself is rather convenient, but it makes sense given we can't do much to actually increase our speed, especially given such a mundane course. Moon 30 is the first and only moon rock sub-area in Bonneton. These sub-areas aren't affected by being marked on the map since all it does is point out the entrance. This sub-area is a special rolling challenge that really highlights the rolling's control. While we are influenced by the ground's hills and slopes, as expected, the tight yellow coin and bonus moon paths are consistently doable due to the rolling controls' non-jerky and responsive nature. The bonus Moon 31 is an excellent side challenge since it's more difficult to maintain the small path than the normal route, although I would still like to see this extended to warrant an entire moon, especially given the yellow coin side path, and same goes with the sub area in general. In either case, this is testing a mechanic, so it's a fantastic start. Thank you, you lovely folk, for taking this journey with me through Bonneton in this series' first kingdom analysis. That'll be a wrap on Bonneton's 31 total moons. Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on future episodes. I'll see you all next episode when we break down the Cascade Kingdom. Oh, ooh, yum, I like that. Yippee!